Okay, then Mr. Osmond, Mr. Farnsworth, you have a PowerPoint presentation and discussion. Yes. Okay, please.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start over the issue, go through the language, the problems for the language for everyone in the audience, get it in detail, get it up front, and then Colin Farnsworth will go after me. So I'm going to start out right here. The National Defense Authorization Act was passed for the last 52 years annually by Congress. It's a funding bill for the military, and it usually never fails to pass. And what happened in 2012 is they put two sections in there, sections 1021 and 1022, and they put it kind of right in the middle of this funding bill, which probably by itself it would have got debated and maybe caught a lot of controversy before it passed. But in this bill that always passes, it was sure to pass, and with a lot of people not even noticing it. So I'm going to go over a few points here. The 2012 NDAA, what is it? The sections 1021B2, covered persons, section 1021C14, disposition and the laws of war, section 1021D, construction and authorities, and section 1022, military custody for foreign al-Qaeda terrorists, section 1022B1, United States citizens. So,
Mr. Osmond,
yes,
we have kind of the counter problem that we started out with. Could you back off from the mic just a little bit?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in a nutshell, what these sections can be interpreted to do is authorize the indefinite detention of American citizens without charge or trial under the laws of war. And it was passed 283 to 136 in the House and 93 to 7 in the Senate. And in President Obama's signing statement, which he signed on December 31st, 2011, he stated in his statement that his administration will not interpret Section 1021 in the manner that ensures any detention authorized complies with the Constitution, laws of war, and all other law. Now, this is just a signing statement from President Obama, but it's quite clear that he acknowledges the dangers to American citizens. And it's obviously a concern of his. And I would like to point out that he says it will comply with the Constitution and the laws of war, but technically, I don't believe that the laws of war and the Constitution can fit in the same country domestically, because they kind of trump each other. So when I move forward with this legislation, I'm going to demonstrate that. Okay, now just a little history on the 2012 NDA. It started out with the 2001 AUMF. Most people don't know what the AUMF is. It's authorized of use of military force. It was passed in 2001, September 18th, right after the September 11 attacks. And it's what we declared war on the terrorists for. Now, what he said, what the language said in the AUMF was pretty retroactive against the terrorists that attacked me. It was those nations, organizations, or persons planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th, 2001. So that's pretty straightforward. There's not much language in that bill. It's real small, and it's definitely pointing exactly who we're targeting during that time of war. Okay, now in the NDA, it kind of expanded that language, and it's covered persons also. In Section 1021B, it starts out by saying anybody who is part of substantially supported al-Qaeda, the Taliban, so on and so forth, or its coalition partners. But the real concern, I think, is with everybody is this language right here, where it says including any person who has committed a belligerent act or has directly supported such hostilities. Now, that is extremely vague, extremely open to interpretation, and I think the concern of all Americans when they're wondering who this applies to, because that's real clear when it says any person. We're not talking about al-Qaeda, we're not talking about the Taliban. So truthfully, this is not just a terrorist bill anymore. You got to look at the broad spectrum of covered persons. It says any person, and belligerent act is undefined within this bill. They have no definition. It's open to interpretation. So what is a belligerent act? I mean, can the U.S. government now proclaim that the Constitutional Protective Act of protest against the government is a belligerent act? and legally lock up those who participate with such protest. Traditionally here in America, if we were charged with something, like being a belligerent, we would actually have evidence presented at us. We'd have a court and a jury of our peers and a judge to decide if that was true. But with this legislation, that doesn't matter. So we have undefined, ambiguous words, any person, and you don't get to see the evidence against you. So I'm going to go into section 1021C14, disposition under the laws of war. Now this is where we get the indefinite detention from, where it states, disposition under the law of war, the disposition of a person under the law of war as described in section A, covered persons, may include the following. Now I underlined may right there because that's not exactly conclusive. What follows this might not be everything that you're subjected to under the laws of war. And number one starts out detention under the law of war without trial until the end of hostilities. Now, if you're committing a belligerent act, when is that going to stop? I mean, that's undefined. So that's kind of where they get the indefinite detention from. That's more of a tactic, possibly. Again, it's undefined. So now we're saying any person may. Okay, this is may, because the laws of war incorporate a lot of things. They're what we do in wartime on a battlefield. And as last I saw, that Wayne County is not a battlefield. May include the following. So it could be a number of things. It might not be detention under the law of war. We don't know. It's more vagueness, more ambiguity. Okay, now this is one of the sections that a lot of our congressmen stand on right here to counter this language and say, hey, you know, this doesn't apply to American citizens. We didn't intend it to apply to American citizens. And it's section 1021D and E, construction and authorities. And what these sections say, pretty much in a nutshell, it says it is intended to limit or expand the authority of the president or the scope of the authorization for use of military force. It also says that authorities, nothing in this section shall be construed to affect existing law or existing authorities relating to the detention of American citizens. Now, this section right here, in fact, if you look back in the AUMF and you look back into to a lot of the court cases, the President of the United States actually claimed in some of his statements that these powers already exist. In fact, in the Hedges versus Obama case, they said that they had everything, all these powers in this under the AUMF. They were just simply reauthorizing it and recodifying it into it. So it didn't have to limit or expand any of the authority they had because they previously had it under the AUMF. Here we go. This is actually in his signing statement. The President of the United States said, with the AUMF, and I'm just going to get to the underlined here because I don't want to spend too much time on it. This section breaks no new ground and it is unnecessary. The authority it describes was included in the 2001 AUMF as recognized by the Supreme Court and confirmed through lower court decisions since then, which obviously would make it constitutional if it went through the Supreme Court. And that is in his signing statement right there explaining it. Why they put it in there if it means nothing, I don't know. Okay, now, the other section where most congressmen stand on to support this bill is in section 1022 that applicates itself to foreign al-Qaeda terrorists, which is really important because this is a whole new section. And you go down to covered persons. The requirement to detain in paragraph 1 shall apply to a person who is detention under the section 1022 or 1021 who is determined to be a member or part of al-Qaeda or associated force that acts in coordination with or support to the direction of al-Qaeda. Now this is pretty clear. We're talking about al-Qaeda here. There's no vague terminology. It doesn't break up. It's all one flowing language right there. And the requirement to detain in paragraph 1, which is shall, so you go up to shall, except as provided in paragraph 4, the armed forces of the United States shall hold the person described in paragraph 2. So technically, we are only talking about al-Qaeda in here, and this does not offer any protections to American citizens. Now, this is the statement that refers up there. Section 1022, B1. United States citizen The requirement to detain a person in military custody under this section does not extend to citizens of the United States. Okay, first of all, making the requirement not extend to American citizens is making it an option. If you're not required to do something, you can still do it, correct? Now, I've been thinking to myself, Congress makes a lot of prohibitive language, okay? Don't you think they would just simply cut and paste something into this and not leave the option open to make it ambiguous? Personally, I would think so. I would think there would be better language than the requirement to detain, which we already went over the requirement to detain in the last slide. It is shall, and it only applies to Al-Qaeda. And the title of this section, which it does say in this section, is foreign Al-Qaeda terrorists. We're not talking about U.S. citizens in Section 1021. So that argument is irrelevant. And here's just a headline I saw today that wasn't very pleasing, but it was about a teenager that tweeted on an airline, and I think it was, American Airline, and she tweeted a joke, and it looked like more of a terrorist threat, and she was later arrested, I believe, by the FBI, which was interesting. And she said that, I mean, it was kind of vague. She said, on June 1st, I'm going to do something really big, bye. And she said she was part of Al-Qaeda. Now, the FBI tracked her down. The girl pleaded with the airline, writing, "I'm just a girl," and claiming the threat was just a joke made by her friend. But when we're talking about legislation like this, and we're talking about a child joking around, they can be detained without charge or trial. Now, she was not detained under these provisions, but this is the type of threat we find here in Lane County that applies to Lane County citizens. Personally, I have a young child, and I want to see him grow up, and I don't want to worry that when he doesn't come home, who actually ended up with him. You know, and that's a legitimate concern.
Mr. Osborne, out of deference to Mr. Collinsworth, you're about 11 minutes in right now.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have.